Have you ever wondered why Alfred Hitchcock's Birds and the Birds seem so eerily realistic? Welcome to the Muy Machos Movie Trivia series that dives deep into the hidden gems, bizarre backstories, and mind blowing secrets behind your favorite films. If you think movies are just entertainment, buckle up because trivia isn't just facts, it's the spark that reignites your love for cinema. Picture this: behind every iconic scene lies a treasure trove of what ifs and did you knows that could turn a casual viewer into a trivia titan. From the real life inspirations that shaped villains like Darth Vader to the onset mishaps that birthed blockbuster moments, we'll uncover how these tidbits make moving watching we'll uncover how these tidbits make watching movies an endless adventure. Whether you're a diehard cinephile or just love a good story, each episode promises laughs, gasps, and that aha moment that makes you see your favorite movies in a whole new light. Today we'll go through Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist from 1982 when I was just a 12-year-old macho. And please subscribe if you're new here and want to stay connected. So grab your popcorn, hit play, and let's peel back the curtain on the silver screen's most fascinating secrets. You won't believe what you've been missing until now. Now, I just watched this movie again last night for I don't even know how many times. And I just want to go through some trivia here about the movie itself and the production of the movie. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started here. As we can see, Poltergeist, 1982. So Heather O'Rourke, who played the little girl, Carol Ann, has a goldfish that she got after her parakeet died, or her little bird died. She ended up keeping that goldfish after the movie was filmed. Robbie, who is the brother, the brother in the movie, both of the terrors that plague Robbie came from Steven Spielberg's own fears as a child. A fear of clowns, if you remember the creepy clown that attacks Robbie toward the end of the movie, and the tree outside his window, that if you look really close, maybe not that close, you could tell it's not even a real tree, but that's okay. We're not here to cast doubt. But anyway, that was one of Spielberg's fears as a kid. James Karen, who played Craig T. Nelson's boss with the real estate company. At the time, he was also the commercial spokesman for Pathmark Supermarkets. It says he received hate mail from people saying they would never shop there again because of the way he treated the Freelings, Craig T. Nelson's family, and that. So he was like a local known guy. Oops on that one. But he's immortal in Poltergeist. Drew Barrymore was considered for the role of Carol Ann, but producer Steven Spielberg wanted someone quote unquote more angelic. Barrymore's audition ultimately landed her the part of Gertie, though, in E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which was, as you'll find out, in production at the same time. At around the 43-minute mark, when Steve tells the parapsychologist his family members' ages, Steve is Craig T. Nelson, he says that Dana, the eldest daughter, is 16 and that his wife Diane is 31, although it says 32 here. Many viewers interpret this to mean that Diane was only 16 when she gave birth to Dana. However, in the novelization of the film, it clarifies that Diane is Steve's second wife and that Dana is actually Diane's stepdaughter. In the movie, when telling the parapsychologist about his family, Steve specifically says, "My daughter Dana," and not "our daughter Dana." Although in the movie, she does call Diane mom on more than one occasion. So this next one, it says, when filming the scene in which Heather O'Rourke, the little girl, had to hold on to the headboard while the wind machine blew toys into the closet behind her, the young actress fell apart, emotionally. Producer Steven Spielberg stopped everything, took her in his arms, and said that she wouldn't have to do that scene again. 40 something years ago, it was a much different landscape in film. There's now a lot more rules and a lot more oversight, which I suppose is a good thing. Next, here we see, believe it or not, real human skeletons were used in the swimming pool scene, since the crew decided it would be too complicated and expensive to get fake ones. Toby Hooper, the director, had previously done the same thing in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a few years earlier. Jo Beth Williams was not made aware of this fact until after the scene was finished. Yeah, maybe that was lucky. Who knows what would have happened. The Freelings' home that used in the film is located in Simi Valley, California, where it still stands today. The family who did own it sold it in May of 2009. Heather O'Rourke was chosen for the film when she was eating lunch with her mother and sister at an MGM commissary, so I guess she was already in the biz. Producer Steven Spielberg came up to them and wanted O'Rourke for the part of Carol Ann. She initially failed the screen test because she kept laughing her way through the audition, even though when she was supposed to be afraid. Spielberg thought she was too young to take the part seriously, but he still recognized something special in her, so he asked her to come back for another audition, and this time bring a scary storybook with her. He also asked her to scream, so she screamed and screamed until she started crying. This audition got her cast as Carol Ann. So you see, back then, these producers and directors were not so concerned about the welfare of the actors, especially child actors. At around 14 minutes in this scene, Steve and Diane Freeling are in their bedroom, and the movie, which was a guy named Joe, is playing on their TV. Not only is this a movie about a dead person who's still who's quote unquote hanging around as the spirits in the film are, but Steven Spielberg remade a guy named Joe 7 years later as Always in 1989, which I believe was Richard Dreyfuss, and Spencer Tracy was in that guy named Joe. They show him in the scene. 2 cast members were subsequently murdered. Dominique Dunn was strangled, and she played the daughter, was strangled by her former boyfriend, John Thomas Sweeney, in the driveway of her West Hollywood home on October 30th, 1982. The movie had just come out. She died 5 days later at the age of 22. Lou Perryman, who was one of the workmen in the very beginning, he was killed with an axe. By Seth Christopher Tatum in Austin, Texas in 2009. He was 67. I'm not sure why they're putting the middle names in there. Are they doing like a Lee Harvey Oswald thing? Who knows? But tragic nonetheless. There was a DirecTV commercial in 2008 that affectionately parodied the film. Craig T. Nelson reprised the role of Steve Freeling, complaining to Carol Ann and the audience that the static on the TV set is just bad cable reception, and quips, "Not getting rid of cable? That's going to come back to haunt me." Heather O'Rourke's family was pleased with the ad for keeping her memory alive, because we'll get to it here. She passed away in 1988 at a very young age. There was a scene in the kitchen where there was a steak that Steve had taken out. I guess he was going to cook a steak in the middle of the night. Anyway, the crawling steak was done by using a real steak, which was laid over a slot cut between the tiles and the countertop. 2 wires are fastened to the bottom of the steak, and a special effects operator hidden under the counter would simply move the wires to make it crawl, kind of like a caterpillar inchworm thing. A similar operation was done when Diane presents to Stephen the chairs that move across the room by themselves. A wire is fastened to one of the legs under the set. An operator first wobbles the chair with the wire to kind of show that it's about to move, then drag the chair across to the destination. What I didn't know is the film was originally given an R rating from the Motion Picture Association, which used to be the Motion Picture Association of America, due to scenes of a child in peril, despite very little gore in the film. The rating was lowered to PG on an appeal. The film does predate the PG-13 rating by a couple of years, which is the rating this film would most certainly have gotten without the issues. So Children in Peril, I guess they're talking about when the tree was attempting to eat Robbie, and when Carol Ann is, although it's happening off camera, she's being brutalized by these spirits. But I guess they won the appeal on that and gave it a PG, which I'm sure greatly affected the success of it. If children had not been able to see this movie, it would have affected the box office and popularity. Next, we have so Steven Spielberg offered Tobe Hooper, who's the actual director of the movie, the script for E.T. When Hooper declined, although I don't know why he would, Spielberg gave him the not yet written script for this film and directed E.T. himself. There was a lot of um, controversy and cloak and dagger stuff going on between with Spielberg. It seems between the ET with Toby Hooper, between Poltergeist and ET. There's a few more items like that in here, I believe. This was the highest grossing horror film of 1982 and the eighth highest grossing film of the entire year. Released in October 1982 to take advantage of the Halloween weekend. It was also shown in theaters for one night only on October 4th, 2007, to promote the 25th anniversary DVD released 5 days later. The event also included a documentary about poltergeist phenomena, which is available on the DVD. For you folks who don't know, a DVD is a digital video disc. Maybe you never saw one or heard of one. All right, back in the olden times, 5 years ago. So ask your dad about it. The clown puppet used in the film is on display in Planet Hollywood in Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. That may not be entirely accurate. There's another blurb in here about a different owner of it, I believe. But I guess we'll see here later. And I'm not even sure Planet Hollywood's still there. I haven't been to Vegas in a while. But the theme music is known as Carol Ann's theme. It was originally titled Bless This House and was written like a lullaby as a contrast to the horror in the film. There are lyrics which can be found on the internet. So maybe that's just a nice contrast. And there are times when even a lullaby or a little kind of a sound of a mobile can be creepy. Poltergeist special effects and score were both nominated for Oscars, but lost to Steven Spielberg's bigger film, E.T., in both categories. So this is what I mean. It's another example of this difference between the two movies that Steven Spielberg was producing at the time. So maybe he just wanted to go with a stronger horse for whatever reason. Now here we have an earlier draft of the film was called Nighttime or It's Nighttime. It had substantial differences from the final film, including an elder teenage son named Carrie, the haunting being the result of the neighborhood being built over the secret burial place of a group of pioneers who were massacred by a savage Native American tribe who worshipped an evil fire god. The Freelings becoming ostracized and later persecuted by the community, the haunting spreading out to the rest of the neighborhood, Stephen being possessed before having sex with Diane, she secretly resenting Carol Ann because she was an accidental pregnancy, Carol Ann and Dana both being possessed by spirits, with Carol Ann repeating the original title over and over and over, and Dana reliving the pioneer's horrific fate of being burned alive and the death of Carol Ann. So it's the writers of the screenplay, Mark Victor and Michael Grace, insisted that one member of the family had to die in that original screenplay. And when Spielberg relented and asked which one, they chose Carol Ann. So much to Spielberg's surprise and chagrin. That original ending of the film had Carol Ann being possessed by the ghost and abandoned by her family and left to die as the house burned down, leading to the entire neighborhood becoming a literal ghost town. So wisely, Steven Spielberg was uncomfortable by how dark and bleak it had become and insisted it be toned down. A lot of those ideas the writers had would later be used or reused rather in Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, which came out a few years later in 1986. At around 24 minutes in, the movie's line by Carol Ann as she's looking into the static filled TV screen. Well, actually, she turns and says, "They're here," was voted as the number 69 movie quote by the American Film Institute out of 100. Number 69 there. Again, Steven Spielberg worked on this film and E.T. the Extraterrestrial literally back to back. Principal photography on Poltergeist ended in August of 81. Then Spielberg took a few weeks off and began to work on E.T. That's a little sketchy there, while Toby Hooper, the director of Poltergeist, spent 10 weeks in the editing room completing his initial cut. Spielberg did supervise the visual effects for both films simultaneously, which were produced at Industrial Light and Magic under the supervision of Richard Edlin and Dennis Murin. And once post-production work on Poltergeist began in 82, Spielberg was in total control. He was responsible for the final edit of the film. Spielberg's usual editor, Michael Kahn, edited this film, while Carol Littleton edited E.T. The final sound mixes and loops, the supervision of the visual effects, and the selection of Jerry Goldsmith as the composer of the score. Poltergeist and E.T. opened to theaters nationwide only a week apart during the summer of '82, which I remember. Poltergeist on June 4th, and then E.T. a week later on June 11th. I even had I saw E.T. button, FYI, so be jealous. Spielberg later said if E.T. was a whisper, Poltergeist was a scream. Indeed. So Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams are 15 and 11 years older than Dominique Dunne, who played their teenage daughter. Pretty weird. And this next one here, the word poltergeist is German for noisy ghost. If you ever wondered that, I know I have. You know, the other reason for this is the other reason I love trivia so much is when a movie is on, I could sometimes drop a little knowledge here and there about something, and it makes people think I'm really smart. So, I'll take it. Next, we see Zelda Rubinstein filmed her part in 6 days. That seems like a long time. And of course, I'm not in the movie industry, but I know these scenes sometimes take extended amounts of time and retakes and setup and all that stuff. So, and she's in a fair portion of the film. So, at around 1 hour 44, when Diane goes upstairs trying to save Robbie and Carol Ann, it can be seen how the corridor seems to extend itself to infinity. You see this in a lot of movies. You see this in Jaws. You see this in if you think back, it's a cinema technique called retro zoom or dolly zoom. They also call it Zolly and the vertigo effect. It combines a backward zoom of the lens with a forward dolly, or in reverse, a forward zoom with a backward dolly. A dolly is it's a little kind of like a cart on a track. So if you've ever seen a production of a movie where it's rolling around, it kind of looks like railroad tracks. By compensating for the two effects, the main object remains the same size in the frame, but the perspective with which the background is seen is changed. The effect name comes from Alfred Hitchcock's thriller Vertigo, starring Jimmy Stewart. Hitchcock used it to very prominently to create the sensation of vertigo that that plagues John Ferguson, Scotty Ferguson, the Jimmy Stewart character in the movie. Go watch Vertigo. Awesome classic Hitchcock movie. Time Magazine and Newsweek tagged the summer of 1982 as the Spielberg summer because of this film and E.T., the extraterrestrial. They were both released a week apart from one another in June. Lou Perryman is credited as Pugsley. He comes through the window and I think he's eating a muffin or something, takes a drink of coffee. But Diane refers to him as Bluto. Oh yeah, when she catches him drinking her coffee and testing her, oh yeah, there's a sauce. And then terrible, but he's the guy who ended up getting murdered in 2007 with an axe. Really. Steven Spielberg hired Tobe Hooper after being impressed with his work on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So that's a little bit of a time stretch there, and also it may be the same genre, but it seems a little dissimilar to what this is. But whatever. What do I know? Steven Spielberg is the man. So at around 1 hour 16, Tangina, who is the parapsychologist, the redheaded lady in the glasses who's running the team, said this house has many hearts. At around 1 hour 16 minutes, Tangina said this house has many hearts. Literally, there are heart-shaped items all over, like the heart lamp, heart stuck on a wall, and a heart poster, and a green heart balloon in the children's room. This is one of the rare films for which Steven Spielberg has a writing credit. He's mostly known for producing and especially for directing, but he is credited here as writer, or one of the writers. So this is the part I heard about a long, long time ago. So the so-called Poltergeist curse, it's an urban legend, largely based on the 4 cast members' deaths between 1982 in 1988. However, only one of the deaths was unnatural. So 22-year-old Dominique Dunn's ex-boyfriend, who she plays the daughter, the older daughter, strangled her after she rebuffed his attempt to reconcile, and she died 5 days later. Julian Beck, who appears in Poltergeist 2, died after a long battle with stomach cancer. Will Sampson, also from Poltergeist 2, died from a transplant. But most notably, the Heather O'Rourke, Carol Ann, died at age 12 from complications of intestinal stenosis after being misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1987. So she was just 12 years old. Poor kid. Lou Perryman, as I just mentioned, who played the construction worker Bluto, named in the credits as Pugsley, was murdered in 2009. My bad, that was 2007. Jo Beth Williams, Craig T. Nelson, and Oliver Robbins, who plays Robbie. The rest of the Freeling family, as well as many of the other cast members, are still alive, or they were as of last year, and they are. Zelda Rubinstein, you may say Steen, has said in interviews she didn't like Tobe Hooper, the director, because she could see that he had a drug problem. Okay, I guess so. I mean, who knows? Although the on-screen credit goes to Tobe Hooper, a wealth of evidence suggests that most of the directorial decisions were made, in fact, by Steven Spielberg. In fact, Steven Spielberg had wanted to direct it himself, but a clause in his contract stated that while still working on E.T., the extraterrestrial, Spielberg could not direct another film. Hooper, though, had developed the film with Spielberg, and if he wanted to wrest the film away from Hooper, it would have caused a rift between the filmmakers. Members of the cast and crew, including executive producer Frank Marshall and the actress Zelda Rubinstein, have stated that Spielberg cast the film, directed the actors, though this has often been contested by several other performers, and designed every single storyboard for the movie himself. Well, these movies, they draw out physical storyboards and put them in order of how they're going to be either filmed or done at the end. Although Hooper has maintained he both collaborated on and did fully half of the storyboards. Based on this evidence, the DGA opened a probe into the matter, the Directors Guild of America, but found no reason that co-director credit should go to Spielberg. Stephen King was briefly approached to write the screenplay. It would have been the first written by King directly for the screen, but the parties could not agree on terms. I'm kind of glad he didn't. I like it the way it is. One of the reasons Steven Spielberg spent more time on set than he should have done as a producer was due to delays on E.T. Maybe delays should be in quotes, where he was running back and forth between productions. This film came about from Steven Spielberg's failed attempt to do a sequel to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That I had never heard, and that's pretty wild. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, epic movie. You should definitely see that. If you haven't, I'm not going to tell you anything about it, other than it's a Spielberg movie. It is awesome, and you should go see it, or look it up rather. Dominique Dunn's only appearance in a theatrically released film as she was murdered by her ex-boyfriend in October, maybe even before it was even released. Tragic. In addition to the 2 times that the Beast appeared in the movie, the face that appeared in the closet to Craig T. Nelson, and the creature that guarded the kid's door, the script had it appearing during a scene where the family and investigators are looking at the tape of the manifestation. The giant ghost that they saw visually slowly resolved itself into the image of a face of a cruel old man, known in the sequels as Reverend Henry Kane. And if you've seen the sequels, you remember how creepy that dude is. At around an hour and 11, the scene in which Diane opens the bedroom door and is met with a fearsome scream was the first to be filmed. Jo Beth Williams had a supernatural experience during the making of the film. Whenever she came home from filming, the pictures on the walls of her house were crooked. Every time she fixed them, they would hang crooked again. And Zelda Rubinstein also had an experience when a vision of her dog came to her and said goodbye. Hours later, her mother had called her and told Rubinstein that her dog had passed away that very day. Pretty creepy. So after telling a reporter that he basically directed the movie himself, Steven Spielberg took back the comments and issued an apology to Hooper, saying his contribution to the film was invaluable. And what he said was that Tobe Hooper isn't a take charge kind of guy. I don't know. One of the earliest films to deal with EVP, electronic voice phenomena. I would say if it wasn't for Poltergeist and maybe a couple other movies, you wouldn't have all these fake ass ghost hunter shows on TV where they never really seem to see anything that they didn't put there themselves. Moving on here, when questioned about who had greater control over this film, Steven Spielberg or Tobe Hooper, Spielberg replied, Tobe isn't a take charge sort of guy. If a question was asked and an answer wasn't immediately forthcoming, I'd jump in and say what we could do. Tobe would nod in agreement, and that became the process of the collaboration. Co-producer Frank Marshall spoke out to the press and claimed the creative force was Steven. Tobe was the director and was on set every day, but Steven did the design for every storyboard and was only absent for 3 days during the shoot because he was in Hawaii with George Lucas. Hooper later claimed that he did half the storyboards. Spielberg then sent a letter to Hooper to clarify matters. Regrettably, some of the press has misunderstood the rather unique creative relationship you and I shared throughout the process of making Poltergeist. I enjoyed your openness in allowing me, as a writer and a producer, a wide berth for creative involvement. Just as I know you were happy with me, you were happy with the freedom you had to direct Poltergeist so wonderfully. Through the screenplay, you accepted a vision of this very intense movie from the start, and as a director, you delivered the goods. You performed responsibly and professionally throughout, and I wish you great success on your next project. Sounds like a little bit, what do they say? Methinks he does protest too much, but whatever. Water under the bridge. Zelda Rubinstein disagreed, however. While Hooper did set up the shots, Spielberg would make adjustments, and in regards to meeting him for her audition, said Hooper was only partially there. The issue then of who had creative control is still a muddy issue even today, but the general consensus is it was Spielberg. When writers Michael Grace and Mark Victor first met with Steven Spielberg, they were being hired to write the film that eventually became Always from 1989. When Spielberg happened to mention he also had an idea for a ghost story, Grace and Victor said they'd rather write the ghost story than Always, and that's how they got this job. All right, that's cool. This film and E.T., the extraterrestrial, were filmed within 20 minutes of each location. And if you look, when you remember both movies, it looks like the same neighborhood, at the same time, too, in that area of California. Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper wanted virtually unknown actors to play the Freelings because they wanted to add a realism to the family that would off-balance the ghost story. They felt that if the audience watched well-known stars, then it would take away from the realistic feel of the characters. At least that's what they've said in interviews since the release of the movie. Although this explanation from Spielberg might be a post-facto excuse to explain why they couldn't ensnare any big-name talents in Hollywood to star in this. Because as a matter of fact, superstar Shirley MacLaine was approached by them to play Diane Freeling, and she turned them down because she said she objected to the terrorization of children. And she is not an unknown, but you'll see another item in here that she decided to do Ordinary People instead. At an hour 45 in, the sign of the Holiday Inn reads, "Welcome, Dr. Fantasy and friends." That was kind of a little nod from the production team. Dr. Fantasy is the nickname of the producer, Frank Marshall. So, all right, that's cool. Zelda Rubinstein auditioned for the part of medium Tangina 4 times. So when you see her, she's obviously a smaller person. I'm not sure if she's by definition a little person, but definitely has a very distinctive voice. I can't imagine who else they were considering for this. It seems perfect for her to be kind of an odd kind of character look. I'm not sure it would have worked as well any other way. This film was selected by the New York Times as one of the best 1,000 movies ever made. That's no stretch, I guess. It's pretty good. Dr. Lesh, that's who leads the team. Dr. Lesh, played by Beatrice Straight, makes the point that the paranormal activity at the Freeling home is probably a poltergeist, not a haunting, since poltergeists typically are associated with a person and hauntings are associated with a place. However, this assessment is revealed to be incorrect when Stephen realizes that the house was built on a cemetery. That means it was actually a haunting, not a poltergeist. So even the whole name is is ironic. Zelda Rubinstein supposedly had genuine psychic ability, claiming to have visions of things before they happened. Okay, well, maybe. When originally released in the UK, the film was anticipated as being an X certificate, prohibiting anyone from under 18 seeing the film. Like similar to our, well, exactly like our rated R at the time. This rating was also printed onto the poster art. This was due to a delay of the BBFC's introduction of the new 15 certificate, which replaced the old AA rating. And UIP's wish to release the film as soon as possible. When the 15 certificate was introduced in November '82, the film was re-rated. In Robbie's room, there's an Alien poster on the wall, 1979. This is a nod to Jerry Goldsmith, Poltergeist composer, who also scored Ridley Scott's movie 3 years before. This was Steven Spielberg's fourth film as a producer, after I Want to Hold Your Hand, Continental Divide, and Used Cars. In a recent interview, Oliver Robbins, who played the brother Robbie, said Steven Spielberg toasted Heather O'Rourke's birthday on the set with a bottle of wine for all the adult actors. She played Carol Ann. He said Spielberg then said when O'Rourke was 21, he would buy her a bottle of wine. Tragically, that day never came, as O'Rourke died on February 1st, 1988, at age 12, due to cardiopulmonary arrest and intestinal stenosis during the filming of Poltergeist 3. At around an hour and 2 minutes, the scene in which Marty hallucinates in the laundry room was the last to be filmed. Robbie has a poster in his room for Super Bowl 22, which would not take place for another 6 years. Heather O'Rourke died the day after Super Bowl 22, which was played in San Diego. Near the end of the film, just before she's sent rolling up the walls of her bedroom, you'll notice 3 photos that Diane has on a dresser in front of the window. A photo of her husband Stephen's face, a photo of Carol Ann with what looks to be a black mask over her eyes, and a photo of either herself or the older daughter Dana, with the blue sky and a large blue body of water behind her. Once the camera pulls back, though, and Diane starts to be sent up the wall, the pictures change. The photo of Stephen has been turned slightly to the left toward Diane as she's assaulted by the beast. The photo of Carol Ann is gone and has been replaced by a photo of what appears to be a woman wearing glasses. Tangina, perhaps, with a black mark or mask covering the lower part of her face. And the last photo of Dana is now tinted darker and with a gray sky. This film and E.T., the extraterrestrial, are famously close to one another. Both movies were filmed in close proximity and are the creative visions of Steven Spielberg. In fact, they originally started out as one film called Night Skies, about a family in the countryside being terrorized by evil aliens. However, one of these aliens would befriend the family's youngest child, would turn on its own kind to protect the family. Due to troubles with severe tonal clashes, it was decided to split the concepts of an alien befriending a child and a family being terrorized by supernatural forces into 2 separate films. So that contradicts an earlier statement, but I wonder. At around 43 minutes, during Steve Freeling, Craig T. Nelson's interview with Dr. Lesh and her associates at the college, the backward writing on the office door reads Department of Popular Beliefs, Superstitions, and Parapsychology. The special effects for Poltergeist were produced by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, and overseen by Richard Edlund. The film won the BAFTA Award for Best Special Visual Effects and earned a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, which it lost to Summer's other summer hit, E.T., the Extraterrestrial. BAFTA is the British Oscars, for more or less. Marty, the person on the parapsychology team, was originally named Dr. Casey Tack, and instead of having a vision of ripping his own face off, he instead saw himself as a rotting corpse in a coffin. And as fake as the ripping his own face off, as fake as it now looks, almost clownish, It was pretty disturbing at the time. In a 2007 Ain't It Cool News interview, Zelda Rubinstein discusses her recollections of the shooting process. She said Steven directed all 6 days she was on set. Hooper set up the shots and Steven made the adjustments. She also alleged that Hooper allowed some unacceptable chemical agents into his work, and that during her audition, Toby was only partially there, meaning he was high, allegedly. Comments from actor James Cameron concerning the 25th anniversary Q&A event, which both attended, categorized Rubinstein's remarks as unfair to Hooper. She laid into Toby, and I don't know why. Toby was kind to her, according to James Cameron. So, and you'll notice this a lot too when you see it. The children's bedrooms littered with Star Wars stuff. A lot of those things I had. I had the sheets and I had the Darth Vader case for the action figures. C-3PO light switch, Star Wars movie poster, Darth Vader poster, and the C-3PO R2-D2 poster. I had that one. The Empire Strikes Back blanket on Robbie's bed, a TIE fighter near the window, a gun turret and Probot playset from the Empire Strikes Back, which I did not have. Also near the window, a jacket with a picture of Chewbacca on the back, which Robbie tosses on the clown. A Tauntaun figure with Han Solo and Hoth gear, also from The Empire Strikes Back, or Empire, as the dorks call it. Behind Robbie's head, a large Yoda figure. A Darth Vader action figure carrying case, which I had, and several action figures, including a Stormtrooper, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and R2-D2. Also behind Robbie's bed. On top of the master bedroom television set sits an Atari Video Computer System console with its 2 joysticks, later known as the Atari 2600. This is one of the few Steven Spielberg films not to feature music by John Williams. The name of the neighborhood, Cuesta Verde, is Spanish for green slope. Next, we see Oliver Robbins, who plays Robbie, the brother, as the only surviving child actor of this film that played a member of the Freeling family. Joe Spano was originally cast as family patriarch Steve Freeling, but he was starring in Hill Street Blues at the time, and Bochco wouldn't let him out of his contract. All right. Steven Spielberg first approached Universal about distributing the film before he ended up selling it to MGM. The theme song, written by Jerry Goldsmith, was criticized for being inappropriately cheerful. He also wrote the theme for The Omen, which was praised for effectively setting a menacing, demonic tone. Well, all right, maybe. But if you've seen The Omen, the well, he is not the main character. Gregory Peck's the main character, but the kid in the movie is is the son of the devil. So a little bit different than the Poltergeist story. So I think the score works perfectly. At around 23 minutes, when Carol Ann sits in front of the TV with her parents' bedroom, the time on the TV set shows 2:37. Ooh, this could very well be an homage to the hotel room number 237 in The Shining. I'd be surprised, but you never know. The pet dog of the Freelings is called E-Buzz. The name is a reference to E. Buzz Miller, a recurring character on Saturday Night Live, introduced in 1977. Miller, portrayed by Dan Aykroyd, was depicted as a sleazy public access TV host who made crude and lascivious remarks about various topics. Yes, E. Buzz Miller, and he was usually smoking. At the time, I remember it well because I used to watch it. The novelization clarifies that Diane is actually Stephen's second wife and only Dana's stepmother. Robbie and Carol Ann are Diane and Stephen's children. Steven Spielberg and Michael Kahn edit this film instead of E.T., the extraterrestrial, because Spielberg felt Poltergeist would be harder to edit for him. The Wilhelm scream. So before I say this one, well, here, at around 27 minutes, when the TV plays Go for Broke in the kitchen, one of the soldiers screams, and that sound is what it's called, the Wilhelm scream, which you can look up. It is a kind of an inside joke in the movie community, movie making community, and I know it's also a free sound effect that they're able to use, and it's this ridiculous sounding scream. It's in Star Wars. I mean, it's in many things. Wilhelm scream. Look that up. The metal objects that appear in the house, including a cameo brooch and watches, come from the corpses buried under the house, which they're not aware of yet. This is made explicit in the script, where the items include a metal device used by undertakers to hold a corpse's jaw in place. Shirley MacLaine was offered a starring role, but backed out in order to make Terms of Endearment. I misspoke earlier. It wasn't Ordinary People. It was Terms of Endearment, neither of which I've seen. This is one of 8 very similar movies released in 1982 and 1983 about families battling the supernatural. The others are The Entity, 1982, The House Where Evil Dwells, The Demon Murder Case, Don't Go to Sleep, Amityville 2, The Possession, Amityville 3D in 1983, and the Father's Day segment of Creepshow. The original cast of the film included veteran actor Edward Ashley, who portrayed Dr. Lesch's older and wiser colleague, who convinced her to bring in Tangina to handle the case. The scene was ultimately cut from the film. Oliver Robbins, the brother, starred in 2 movies about a suburban family of 5 being terrorized by ghosts in 1982. Poltergeist and Don't Go to Sleep. The first movie was a theatrical release produced by Steven Spielberg, and the second was a TV movie produced by media mogul Aaron Spelling. Ironically, the Spelling TV movie had a much higher body count and was much scarier. Body count for Spielberg's movie, 0. 1 if you include Tweety the bird. Body count of Spelling's movie was 4. Because, yeah, nobody actually died in this. At around 1 hour and 12 minutes during the conversation in the cemetery, he claims that Steve is responsible for 42% of the houses and properties sold in Cuesta Verde, equivalent to $70 million. Adjusted for inflation, it would be $198 million in 2021. And God knows what it would be now. First and only film produced by Steven Spielberg for his Amblin company. Spielberg was an executive producer on the Back to the Future trilogy and The Money Pit. Released by MGM on June 4th, 1982, Poltergeist was a major critical and commercial success, becoming the 8th highest grossing film of 1982. The word poltergeist is spoken 4 times and only once by 2 different characters. Diane, who's the mother, and Marty, who's on the supernatural team, and twice by Dr. Lesch, the redheaded lady in the glasses. While the theatrical production credits list Dana Gendian and Jamie Gendian under stunts, the reissue includes them among the cast as special children. At around 57 minutes, Dr. Lesch talks with Diane and Robbie about a white light that people see when they're dying. This comes from 2 places. War stories where pilots claim to have seen such a light in combat in the book Life After Life, written by Dr. Raymond Moody and published in 1975. It's a series of compilations and testimonies about people who technically died but were brought back to life, a phenomenon known as a near-death experience. One of the trademarks of this phenomenon is a voice, commonly a friend or family member who died some time ago, saying, "It's not your time," indicating to the person that they must go back to the land of the living. At around 7 minutes, the Los Angeles Rams versus the Saints football game seen near the beginning of the film is taken from a Monday night football game in 1980. Who would have known? Back then, you only saw things once. So there was no way anybody would ever know that until we started using video. According to Jerry Goldsmith, he only worked with Steven Spielberg to compose the original soundtrack. Okay. At the time of this film's setting, cable TV and the 24-hour news cycle were just starting to emerge. So it was customary for TV stations to sign off, usually with the national anthem, as shown here, when broadcasts were done for the night. The next morning, the national anthem, often with a flag raising, shown, would herald a new broadcast day. Skeletons and ancient desecrated burial grounds crop up in other Steven Spielberg productions, including Raiders of the Lost Ark and Young Sherlock Holmes. Poltergeist is included among the American Film Institute's 2001 list of the top 100 most heart-pounding American movies. At around 9 minutes, when Diane attempts to flush the dead pet bird, it casts a shadow in the shape of a shark. I didn't notice that. I'll have to check. Poltergeist: The Legacy in 96 was a sci-fi horror TV series focusing on the paranormal, which came out after Poltergeist 3 wrapped. And although it used the Poltergeist name, it really has nothing to do with any of the films in the franchise. The winding staircase in the middle of the living room is similar to the big, portentous winding staircase in the haunted house of 1961's The Haunting. It's the most Poltergeist is the most commercially successful film of the Poltergeist trilogy, and the original usually is. The scenes of when the mother trying to rescue Carol Ann from the alternate dimension where the beast is located is very similar to the Twilight Zone episode Little Girl Lost. In the episode, a child goes to another dimension, and her father goes in to the alternate dimension while another man who holds on to the father as he calls out to his daughter for her to come back as she screams for her dad's help. And I've seen that episode. If you don't watch the old Twilight Zone show, you really should. You're going to see a lot of things that ended up being used as basis for some of our favorite movies. Joanna Cassidy, Susan Sarandon, and Tuesday Weld were all considered for the role of Diane Freeling, but turned it down. At around 15 minutes, when Diane's in bed with Stephen talking about Carol Ann's behavior, talking to the TV, Steve takes a book in his hands. This book is Reagan, the Man, the President, published in 1981 and written by Hedrick Smith, Adam Clymer, Leonard Silk, Robert Lindsay, and Richard Burt, who were all correspondents for the New York Times at this time. At one point, Diane and Stephen are watching a film in bed. The film in question is the ghost film A Guy Named Joe. It depicts a ghost of an Air Force pilot attempting to pass his knowledge on to an up-and-coming rookie. Robert Broyle's character, credited as Poolman number 1, is named and called by Diane Bluto. That was actually the other guy. According to William Finley, he was originally cast as Marty, but was replaced before filming. Diane tells Carol Ann that if she keeps feeding the goldfish, they'll turn into sharks, referencing Spielberg's blockbuster Jaws. The Freeling car is a 1981 Oldsmobile custom cruiser. Awesome. So poltergeists are the type of ghosts responsible for physical disturbances, such as loud noises and objects being moved or destroyed. There have been reports of this type of ghost since at least the 17th century, starting with the tale of the so-called Glen Luce Devil in 1654. Psychical researchers have noticed that most poltergeist cases seem to center on an adolescent, usually a girl. The house, built on sacred burial ground, recalls The Shining and young Sherlock Holmes, but in this film it was done in secret. While in Holmes, a village tried to put a stop to it, it also mentions that spirits will take revenge against those who defile holy ground. Again, like these films. Most of the film posters on the bedroom shared by Carol Ann and Robbie are in reference to Star Wars. One of them is Alien, which you'll see. The televisions featured in the movie are Sony Trinitron in the living room, Sony KV 9400 in the kitchen, and a Trinitron in the parents' bedroom. So they must have been well-to-do at the time. At around an hour and 40, at a point of the movie, Diane lies in the bed trying to sleep when a supernatural force tries to remove her red shirt, shaking her in the bed like she was being sexually attacked. Coincidentally, a few months later, The Entity was released, which was another horror film about a woman sexually attacked by a supernatural force. Zach Bagans now owns the clown from Poltergeist and is displayed in his haunted museum in Las Vegas. So it's in Vegas somewhere. Try to track it down the next time you're there. Sonny Landham, credited as Pool Worker 2, went on to play Billy Bear in 48 Hours that same year, and later Billy in Predator. Got to see Predator if you haven't. Actually, you should see 48 Hours too. In the scene where Carol Ann and Robbie are in the bedroom as the storm approaches, Robbie's reading the 1981 Captain America comic book, number 259. Today, well, this was in 1024. That issue will be worth about $90. Okay. In the scene with Robbie looking at the clown doll, a Kenner Darth Vader Star Wars action figure case can be seen on the shelf behind him. I actually had that case. The VCR used by the paranormal investigators is a U-Matic. Never heard of it. Robbie Freeling is a comic book fan and is depicted reading the comic book before going to sleep. The issue in question is part of the Captain America series by Marvel Comics. We already knew that. Tangina Barron's name is only spoken once in dialogue. A remake of the film was released in 2015, starring Sam Rockwell and directed by Gil Kenan. Steven Spielberg was not involved in the production. In 1986, the film was sold to Turner Entertainment after the purchase and sale of MGM. In 1996, Time Warner purchased Turner Entertainment, being the only film of the Poltergeist franchise owned by Warner Brothers Entertainment present day. Despite the different events that happen, with Carol Ann missing, there's a complete absence of any kind of police officer or police investigation in the movie, matching with the conversation between Steve and Diane in their bedroom at around 35 minutes. Um, after witnessing the supernatural phenomenon in the kitchen where a chair is moving alone, Steve tells her about calling someone, but she replies that who he would call about it. And even minutes later, when Carol Ann's kidnapped by the ghosts, it would not have made sense to call the police to report about a supernatural missing, because most police wouldn't take the report seriously, or they would suspect that the parents were involved. Interesting fact, though, considering that in movies, it's not explained how Steve meets with Dr. Lesh and her colleagues, Marty and Ryan. And if so, they skip over it. Poltergeist was also a novel by James Caan. It was a novelization of the movie. Carol Ann named her yellow canary Tweety. The pet seems to be named after the Tweety Bird character from the Looney Tunes, who's also a yellow canary. Among the posters in the children's bedroom is one depicting a duo of Bert and Ernie, Muppet characters from Sesame Street. Much of my knowledge that I use to this day, I got from Ernie and Bert. No doubt. Mr. Teague, who is Craig T. Nelson's boss, tells him that Cuesta Verde is an area of 300 acres. It's the equivalent of 1.21 square kilometers or 0.47 square miles. Spielberg regretted never bringing the ghost of Tweety, the yellow canary, back to the family in a touching moment in the eye of the eventual supernatural epic hurricane. In addition, Spielberg face-palmed the flushing scene. Fish are flushed, not birds. The tree outside the children's bedroom, which resembled a very old carob tree, resembled a distorted totem pole. The scary tree outside the window seems to have faces on it long before it would have been animated in a terrifying way. Faces are common in Native American totem poles. In American colloquialism, before all hell broke loose, it was sort of an omen. The classic building on an Indian burial grounds omen was something utterly subtle for viewers to grasp at the time. It is a culture shock to each generation not having things that you require today. Computers, smartphones, and cable TV in every home or on their phone was non-existent in 1982. Video games were at miniature golf courses, 7-Elevens, not in everybody's home. This I can attest to. In the movie, a landline phone was in the kitchen, in the daughter's room. Going into the first quarter of the 21st century, most homes use cell phones as their home phone. Next, the mother found 1950s shiny steel roller skates in the children's messy room. Even 70s kids found this quite odd. Urethane wheel skates attached to boots were coming into popularity into the 80s. What we're missing since 1982? Home computers, dial-up, internet, flip phones, smartphones, Blu-ray, all right, and Tower Records to rent VCR and CD, cable companies to live stream movies. It's hard for each generation to imagine not having whatever they have now. Poltergeist tried to picture a typical middle-class family at the time, and in time capsulized how primitive life was then as to now in the 21st century. The E.T. and Poltergeist houses seem similar, but each were different. E.T. was in Tayunga, and Poltergeist house was in Simi Valley, California. Outside shot from high above the street seemed to have a Steven Spielberg real middle class, recently built feel to them. And another omen, as Robbie was being attacked by the clown, Diane, his mother, was on her bed with pictures of the family in the background. Her husband and two daughters, their pictures were seen before the window. Robbie's picture was missing. Bluto and his Teamsters Local 896 was stealing food from the kitchen in his Teamster shirt. That local is real. Founded in 1941, serving brewers to packagers, to drivers of beer and soft drinks. HQ is in Pasadena. Their members work at places like Budweiser, Miller, Coke. The man playing Bluto is not credited in the movie for part through his two cohorts received credits. Yeah, that part's a little murky. Speculation was a T-shirt and his behavior in a bad light. Again, that was speculation, but his name remains off the film still. Dirk Blocker, the guy on the bicycle, was Dan Blocker's son. Dan Blocker was Haas. All right, in what do you call it, in Bonanza. Damn, he was Hoss Cartwright in Bonanza. His death in May 1972 was pretty much the death knell on the long running series. A show going 10 years was rare. Bonanza was 14. The movie's Turkish poster displays a tagline, "Don't let our children become victims of television." Probably because the original art showed Heather O'Rourke in front of a TV set, and the poster artist, not having seen the movie, assumed it was about the harmful effects of television on kids. Okay. So that's about it. That was a lot more than I thought was going to be there on the trivia for 1982's Poltergeist. Starting to lose it already. Oh man, there was a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, read all that. Okay, so that's it. Hmm. So that's it on the trivia for the Muy Macho um, Trivia Master Series. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it, but pick through, listen to it, watch the movie, read through this, watch the movie, DVR it. Move arrow back and forth to confirm or deny. Please comment on anything that is wrong in these comments. I think I misspoke a couple times. You know what? I'm not going to go through all this and pick out a little teeny tiny thing. If you want to bust my chops about it, feel free. All right, it's okay. I can take it. So thanks again for joining the Muy Macho today. Please do comment, subscribe. The channel's growing a little bit, and I want to keep it rocking here. So please share it and comment. Let me know what you think, or ask any questions. I've seen this movie 15 times. I don't know, 20 times. But that's going to do it for the Muy Macho today. So we will see you down the road there. Adios. Later. Bye.